For truth and diversity, come to RadioSimi.
Hey everyone, welcome to RadioSimi. I'm your host, Aleyah Ewing.
And I'm your co-host, Daeton Dinner.
This week, we'll be interviewing Police Chief Livingstone, going over the latest news, COVID updates, and more places to volunteer. Before we start, we just want to thank all of our supporters.
So far, our channel has over 200 downloads. Thank you guys so much. We couldn't do this without you and everyone at the RadioSimi team.
Remember, if you have any ideas, suggestions, or if you want to come on our show, reach out to us at tiny.cc/RadioSimi form. Here are some news about Simi Valley and the greater area. Due to COVID-19, many of the Simi parks and rec programs have been temporarily closed. You can find more information about specific programs at rsrpd.org. Our congressional representative, Mike Garcia, released a statement on January 4th stating he would be voting to reject some of the electoral votes that would certify Joe Biden's presidential win. After the attack on the Capitol, Trump supporter Mike Garcia kept to his word and voted against electoral votes despite no evidence of fraud. Mike Garcia was seen in Washington, D.C., meeting with future domestic terrorists prior to the attempted coup at the U.S. Capitol. After the attack on the Capitol, Mike Garcia wrote 3 statements condemning the attempted coup. A Simi Valley woman, Maya Ponsetto, attacked and accused a 14-year-old black boy over a false claim while living in New York. She then fled to Peru, California, where she was recently arrested. The Simi Valley Chamber of Commerce is offering free face masks throughout January. You can call them at 805-526-3900. There is a Woman of Color March on January 20th, 11 a.m. at Wilson Park. It is hosted by multiple organizations, including 805 Resistance. Their founder, LaShawn Aaron, will be a guest speaker in a future episode. On Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, January 18th, the Simi Valley's Parks and Rec District is offering a day of service and volunteering. You can register online at rsrpd.org.
And this is Simi Business. For any small businesses that are struggling due to COVID-19, California's new grant to help reduce financial stress. The grant is anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000. The deadline has been extended to January 13th before midnight. So if you're a nonprofit or a small business that needs financial help due to the coronavirus, make sure to get your application in. For the application, go to careliefgrant.com.
Now let's get into politics. There has been a lot of talk recently about the ADEM delegate election, what it is, who's running, what their platforms are, and what actually is an ADEM delegate, because I know there's been a lot of confusion as well. Basically, ADEM delegates are people who were chosen to be representatives of California Democratic people and voters across all of California. The idea is to make sure that everyone within the California Democratic Party is representative of the state of California. It is similar to the California State Assembly, except that this is solely within the California Democratic Party, meaning that if you're a registered Democrat in the state of California that's 18 and up and eligible to vote, you can vote for ADEM delegates. Once elected, these ADEM delegates go to major conventions throughout the state where they can join caucuses and committees. Some of these caucuses are like the Labor Caucus, the Black Caucus, the Female Caucus, the Progressive Caucus, the LGBTQ plus caucus, where delegates can kind of join people who are similar to them. There are also committees where they make decisions within the California Democratic Party. These decisions can be like party leadership, ballot propositions, endorsing candidates. One of the things that they can do within the California Democratic Party is to draft potential legislation. This potential legislation is then vetted and would be voted on the floor by the ADEM delegates that you would be electing. Once they vote on legislation, they then take this legislation and they give it to state legislators and state senators. Usually they're local, so for example, for us, it would be Henry Stern. And then Henry Stern would then take that legislation, and if he approves it, he would then propose it to the California State Legislature. The idea of the ADEM delegates is essentially to make sure that California Democratic voters have control over the direction of the California Democratic Party. These elections are held every 2 years. This year you can find more information about the candidates that are running, the candidates in your district, as well as the candidate statements at adem.cal.gov. elections.cadem.org. You can also register to vote in the ADEM elections. You have to be, as I mentioned before, you have to be 18 and up, a registered Democrat, and one that is eligible to vote. There is a registration deadline. The registration deadline is January 11th, so make sure to get your registrations in before then. You can register to vote at ademelections.com. Next, we have an interview with Chief Livingstone, where we're going to ask him about COVID-19, decreasing crime in Simi Valley, and the Black Lives Matter movement.
Hi, Aleyah.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here, Chief Livingstone. I really appreciate you coming and speaking to both me and Daeton about your experience as the Chief of Police, as well as upcoming issues within Simi Valley and in our own police department. So thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So we had a few questions from people that donate to us. When they donate, they get to submit questions
Okay.
from people that we interview. So we have two people, one of whom you've met over Zoom before. His name's Matt Fenton.
Okay.
And Matt Fenton would like to know why the Simi Valley Police Department is one of the few departments to encrypt all of their communications.
Okay, that's a great question. Well, we've always had the ability to encrypt our communications. Back in the 1990s, we were the only agency in the county. We went to this ultra high frequency band as part of our modernization of our radio system. And it had a feature which is called, we call it Code Edward, which E for encryption. And the original purpose for the encryption was, to protect information in terms of like tactics of officers responding to calls, because we would encounter occasionally burglary suspects and people that were committing robberies that would listen to scanners and try to time our response. But we used it very infrequently because there was really just no practical purpose to use it. And then, it was something that we would use occasionally when we would have to discuss personal information about somebody back and forth between officers. And we wanted to protect that information. Well, then when the state came down with their ruling about protecting personal information and things, somebody's parole status. And these are communications that are routine in police on police radios, where we constantly talk about people's wants and warrants, their parole status, sometimes even their family status and things like that. So the Attorney General ruled that we could no longer do that, and he left it up to the individual police agencies on how to go about doing that. Now, most agencies, larger agencies, have the ability and the staffing and multiple radio frequencies to where they could just say, okay, all communications of a personal nature will be handled on a separate line, so that you can just encrypt that and not the general radio traffic. But for us, right now, we are at a critical mass in terms of our dispatcher staffing. We have our dispatchers right now working 12-hour shifts, canceling days off. The level of individuals in there means that we have to have at least one person to answer 911 calls, because we are the East County 911 center. So we handle all the 911 calls. And then we have to have somebody that's always communicating with the officers. And oftentimes we only have two people in that room. So for us to go to another channel is really, it just doesn't make any sense. We would be really taxing our dispatch center. So because we have the capability of encrypting, we decided to just encrypt everything until we could find a better way, a better approach to it. I'm not a proponent of it, only because I think the public has a need and a right to know that information. And that's why it's broadcast over the airwaves. And as soon as we can find a practical way forward that doesn't stress the dispatchers in terms of the workload issue, then we will return to encrypting only that information that we have to. But right now, we just don't have the ability to do it, plain and simple. And I also know that there's vital information that comes out from that as well during times of emergency. So one of the other plans that we have is that if there is a major emergency in the city, is we would unencrypt for two reasons. Number one, so the public could get the information they need, like for a brush fire and things like that. And number two, all the other agencies in the county don't have the ability to talk to us when we're encrypted. So if there's a major regional emergency, we would unencrypt. So staffing is the main reason, and the goal is hopefully to find a better path forward into the future.
Thank you. Another question that Matt Fenton has is whether or not you agree with the banning of chokeholds, and why or why not.
I do agree with it. I think we have to kind of be careful in terms of, how we deal with the nomenclature or the definitions. Chokeholds are holds where you're actually cutting off somebody's oxygen supply, or it would be like the old fashioned bar arm, where you're putting the arm right across somebody's neck and literally choking somebody. What we use in law enforcement, and what I've always been trained in my 32-year career, is what's called the carotid restraint. And what that does is a little bit different. It cuts off the blood supply to the brain temporarily. So like the carotid arteries along here, along the side of your neck, when that's cut off, the person temporarily faints. I think that any pressure to the neck is problematic. So whether it's a chokehold, which I think are unsafe, and have been proven to be unsafe, because when you put your arm across somebody's windpipe, you're gonna cause severe, great bodily injury, if not death. The carotid restraint, it has to be done by somebody who's highly trained and somebody who rigorously practices it, like people that are martial arts experts or officers who have been trained under the old post guidelines and the peace officer standards and training. We had to be trained with it every year. And whenever we would use it on somebody, you'd have to take them to the hospital first, and they'd have to be under observation. So to me, it's like any martial person that specializes in martial arts will tell you, unless you repeat that continually, then you're not going to do it right under a stressful situation. And it's too easy when you're fighting with somebody, because nobody ever cooperates. When they're resisting an officer, they're not going to just do everything, and all these little techniques that you learn aren't always going to work properly. So somebody's going to move a certain way, and if they do that and you happen to brush across their neck, or you're just up near their neck, I think they're dangerous. So I totally agree with it. I was the first chief in Ventura County to ban it outright, and I did that because when I learned that the state was no longer authorizing its use, and also when the peace officers standards and training said they would no longer train our officers in it, then I said there's no sense in continuing it. And again, when used properly, it's highly effective. I've seen it used in the past where it actually saves lives, because you could use it and prevent from having to use a higher level of force. But at the same time, like I said, if the officer doesn't get the hold just right, if the person is stronger than the officer, which happens a lot, and the officer puts pressure on the frontal part of the neck, it can be devastating. And we've seen that in a number of cases, not here locally in Simi Valley, but in other cases. So I think I think it's wise, and I am totally in favor of it, and I think it's good policy.
Kathleen Capella, another one of our donors, says that she feels intimidated by all the weaponry and SWAT gear with SVPD, and that when she sees them, she's immediately fearful. This is a common emotion among a lot of people in Simi Valley. Right. What can you do to change this image?
Well, I can tell you that weaponry of any kind is intimidating from my perspective, and I'm a police officer, and I carry a gun for a living. But I think what's happened over the last, I would say, really since the North Hollywood shooting, if you go back in history and look at that in LAPD, where these two heavily armed individuals outgunned the police, and the police, at that time it was LAPD, they actually had to go into gun stores to get extra guns to just confront these two individuals. And so at that point is when you started seeing what's called the patrol rifle integrated into policing. And so those are, M16s at that time, but now they're M4 rifles. They're military grade weapons, and officers have been trained to use those, because they are more effective. You can shoot at longer distances, and when you're confronting suspects who are heavily armed and have a lot of firepower, they're helpful. The other thing that's come on in the last 10 to 15 years is the use of Kevlar helmets, because officers wear Kevlar vests, and that has protected and saved a lot of officers' lives over the years. The helmet is the natural next thing, because it protects your head from bullets and things like that of certain calibers. So when you see an officer and he's carrying a patrol rifle, and he's got a helmet on and he's got a tactical gear on, it looks intimidating. But that's safety equipment essentially. It's no different than if you see an officer carrying a shotgun, which officers have been issued shotguns since the beginning of time when we had police departments. A shotgun is actually much more dangerous in a sense, because you're dealing with multiple rounds versus a rifle, which is done when used properly, can put precision accuracy to the officers who are firing in under stressful conditions. So, but the general trend that happened after North Hollywood was it got uber militarized, right? So a lot of departments started buying tracked vehicles and tanks and things like that. And at our department, we only use what we need for a given situation. So For instance, we used to have, or we still do currently have, a light armored vehicle because we didn't have an armored vehicle for our SWAT team. And so what we've done is we've converted to a more modern version of that, which is called a Bearcat, and it's much more. I don't want to say it doesn't look intimidating, but it certainly doesn't look like a light armored vehicle. We are doing away with the light armored vehicle, and it's being decommissioned and given back to the military. And so that's what we're doing. We're looking at those type of things. We don't want to take the patrol rifles out of the officers' hands because they do have a valid use. They're kept locked in the car just like the shotgun. Our officers carry sidearms, pistols. Those have been carried by police officers for years. I do understand that when, like I said, when you see the officer in a Kevlar helmet and they're carrying a rifle and it looks like RoboCop, right? And it looks intimidating, but that's safety equipment. And now what's happened is after George Floyd, now we're re-looking at the militarization of police again very closely. And I think that things like tracked vehicles and things like, they don't belong in law enforcement. They just don't. They're military weapons. But the patrol rifles and the Kevlar helmets, I think they are just a modern version of things that make us safer when we have to go into those rare situations where you have a gunman who has nothing but wanting to kill people, and we need that. So, but we can't take those tools away from our officers. We just have to make sure that we're not going so far the other direction. Like if one thing is good, then we need another thing. We need to make it reasonable for what our actual uses are going to be.
Thank you. So crime has been steadily decreasing in Simi Valley. What do you think is the largest contributor to this?
I think a lot of reasons. Number one, our crime's always been traditionally low because geography plays a role in that. We're a valley. There's really only one way in and one way out rapidly, and that's the freeway. So if a lot of our crime comes from out of the area, and so it's not easy to get in and out of Simi. It's kind of isolated in terms of the geography. The second thing is that we always have been largely a bedroom community. It's a suburban, mostly single family residences and some high density residential. So, you don't really have a lot of these businesses that would maybe be condensed in certain areas and things like that. So I think that's helped a lot. And I think it's also because the citizens care about community safety and they get involved. They call us when they see things that they think may be unusual. They help us whenever there's a situation that comes up where they can identify somebody. And so that's been very helpful for us. I also think the work that the officers are doing is part of that, a big part of it, because they are helping to educate the public, like with through crime prevention programs and things of that nature, being visible. That, even if you just go back to the old criminal justice studies that say just, visibility is a big part of it. If people come into the city and they see the police are out patrolling around, then that has a deterrent effect on it. And I definitely think that people care about the community. And I have always said this, that, we can only do so much, right? We're 125 officers in a city of 140,000. That's not, you can do the math on that. That's not a lot of police officers in a city of our size, 49 and a half square miles. So we rely on the public to help us. We rely on them to be our eyes and ears when we're not there. It goes up and down, but really, in a nutshell, that to look at the core of why it's been steadily going down is that's because people care. There's a lot of education out there, and people take an active role in their community, and I think that's an important part of it.
You mentioned the pandemic in your previous answer.
Mm-hmm.
So what has SVPD been doing to prevent COVID outbreaks within the department? I know that many officers are seen not wearing masks while interacting with civilians on the job. I've had police officers not wearing masks interacting with me.
Right.
What's your plan to curb this?
Well, I mean, we're human like everybody else. That's not an excuse, and certainly I believe we were really at the forefront of the pandemic, because when it first started happening, I got my staff together, and one of our commanders had a connection. We were very fortunate. Commander Gonzalez had a friend that worked in Santa Clara where COVID was really going crazy, and he was able to contact his friend, and his friend said, "Look, here's what you need to start doing right now." Because your whole force could be devastated by this. And so we took it seriously, and we rolled these plans out early on, and we started sending non-essential staff home and working modified shifts. We also started to have our officers, and this is kind of a blessing and a curse in certain ways. We had them start handling more calls that they could handle over the phone rather than going in person to people's homes for a variety of reasons. But that's not always the best way because you lose that personal touch. So that's been a problem at times. But the mask wearing was something that came along. As you know, even our public health, Dr. Levin had come out very early on and said he didn't believe that masks were helpful, and he even made a long statement about that. I remember talking about how they weren't, and the reason being, I think at the time, was they were worried that PPE was going to be taken up by members of the public, and then there wouldn't be enough for our frontline healthcare workers. But as time went on and the evidence became more clear that wearing a mask was important, I think we mandated it right off the bat, and we mandate it still. You cannot be in our station without a mask, and you have to wear a mask all the time unless you're at your workstation or alone in your car. Now, I've seen it. I've seen the officers not wearing masks, and they get written up for it if they're not. We had an officer not too long ago who got into a situation where they ended up not having the proper PPE on, and the supervisor wrote him up. So that's what we do. It's no different than the general population trying to get people to comply with that health order. We do have times where officers get forgetful and don't do it. So our supervisors know this because I emphasize it. I really reinforce it. I wear a mask everywhere I go, and I'm even at work. In my office, I'll wear a mask. If somebody walks into my office, I put my mask on when they walk in. And for the reasons why everybody else is, it's not necessarily about protecting me, although I want to protect myself, but it says a lot about what I feel about protecting other people. So we emphasize that to the officers, and when they don't wear their masks, they get addressed by a supervisor, and it will affect their job sooner or later.
So Daeton's audio is not working, so he can't ask this question, but he did send it to me to ask on behalf of him. Are Simi police officers trained to deal with special needs citizens in any situation?
We are. We've done a lot more of that over the last few years. We have had people from local autism groups come in and give us briefings on how to deal with people that are suffering from autism. People handle things a different way. I'm sure you've seen this around the world. There's been some, or around the country. Utah comes to mind. There's been some tragic cases where officers have actually shot and killed people that are suffering from these ailments because for whatever reason there's fear. And there was one case where a kid got into a car because his parents had went out to dinner, and he backed out of the driveway and the officer shot him. And so we train our officers to recognize people that have a variety of different situations. Like I said, we've had the local autism groups come in and attend our briefings and talk to officers about what some of the signs and symptoms of it are. We've also done a lot more training through our crisis intervention team here in Ventura County. In fact, Simi Valley has one of the better records of departments in the county that we mandate that all of our officers go through this 40-hour program. And in CIT, they get a variety of different situations and learn how to deal with people that are suffering from bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, any number of different types of issues. They learn how to deal with that, and that not just resorting to force right away. So that's a big thing. Could we do more of it? Absolutely. I think to a lot of the things that are happening in law enforcement, training is so important, and I think we're constrained at times, like other departments, with our budget. But we try to emphasize training as much as we can and do it whenever we can. And it doesn't even just have to be formal training. Like I said, sometimes we'll get people that are locally our local residents that want to help, and they'll come in and they'll do it on their own time, and we'll bring them into the briefings to talk to the officers before they go out to the field. We recently had a number of individuals come in and talk about different things where people try to commit suicide by cop, and what are some of the things that we can do to try to help avoid using force in those situations, and how to reach those people. So we do a lot of that. Definitely.
So my last question has to do with defunding the police. A lot of people have been calling for Simi Valley to defund our police department. Many of these suggestions are to keep the officers that we have and to just reduce the amount of officers that we hire. That way, over time, we would slowly reduce our police department and then also, therefore, reduce the price of funding.
Right.
How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the defunding the police, I don't think it's a wise policy, because I think that right now in CME anyway, we have 125 officers. We're pretty much, we've been at that level of officers for a number of years, even though the population has gone up. And there are times when our staffing is so reduced, like on a given shift, we could have maybe 7 officers patrolling 49.5 square miles. So I don't think it's a good thing. And the reason why I don't think it's a good thing also is that, policing is part of good governance. It just is. I mean, really, what keeps our democracy strong are the ability of the state, really, and we are representatives of the state, to come in and mitigate certain situations that may not fall into other categories. Do we have to respond to everything? No. I mean, there's certainly a way that we can look internally or look at ourselves in the mirror and say, okay, maybe we need to change some different ways we approach things. And those don't need to be police related issues. But I just think it's a slippery slope when you start to do that and you start to reduce the numbers. What is the adequate number? I mean, because I've looked at studies that were done a number of years ago by my people that came before me in the chief's job, where they were making the argument that we were under-policed and that because we added Wood Ranch that we would need X amount of officers. And we've resisted that. We've said, no, 125, it works fine. It's a good number. Now, that's always a number that we never actually are able to hold at because we have retirements, people don't make it through training, and there's a constant turnover. So we come up with that number based on officers have to be able to take time off, sick leave, injuries, things like that. So that way we kind of have like a reserve pool to dip into when we need to. I can certainly understand why defunding the police came along and why that became, a rallying cry. I just think that we have to take a step back and like I said, we have to look at our democracy. We have to look at our country, and the answer isn't really to throw it out. The answer is to reform it and to make it able to be more usable for the people, because that's what we're ultimately, a representative of the state. And I think that if we just take the easy way out, which is defund it, do away with it, reduce it, then we're not really solving the problems. If there are problems there, if we have problem officers, we have to deal with those individuals and correct it. So.
All right. Well, we don't have any more questions. So I just want to thank you so much for coming to speak with us today and answering some of the frequently asked questions that I know have been populating around Simi Valley a lot. So thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
No, thank you. I thank you for having me. It's always my pleasure. And, as long as I'm in charge of the department, we're going to try to do the best we can to be the best we can possibly be, So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now here are some volunteer opportunities. St. Rosa Lima is always accepting food donations to help the homeless in and around CME. They're open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can reach them at 805-526-1732. Due to the coronavirus, the Samaritan Center on Royal Avenue is only accepting new clothes. If you can, please call at 805-579-9166 to help those who need it most. The Battered Woman's Thrift Shop provides low-cost goods to domestic abuse victims in Ventura County. They do pickup, so if you're interested in donating some clothes, call 800-451-4499. When you call, leave a message and they'll call you back.
We're here with my protest buddy Kevin, who's going to share with us his song, On God, featuring 805 Cali.
Yo, what up, everybody? This is K-Dog. I'm a hip-hop artist in Simi Valley, California. I was born in the San Fernando Valley, but my parents moved here in 1978 when I was 2 years old. I'm heavily influenced by West Coast hip-hop from the late 80s to the mid-90s. This right here is a song called On God, featuring the homeboy 805 Cali, also from Simi Valley. And I'd like to say much love and big shout out to RadioSimi for having us. Thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoy.
Got my mom, brother, and sister tattooed on my chest. Got my dad on my forearm, cause we laid him to rest. They say rest in peace, but where's the peace for the rest of us? Ashes to ashes, full dust to dust. Death is a not even trying to hide. a hideous monster without a disguise. I see that black truck too often, always offering rides. I say a few words and glance up at the sky. Please God protect me, I'm just trying to do me. I know that I've sinned, but man, you know I believe. I ain't gotta be up in a book to prove that I trust you. I ain't up early on Sundays to prove that I love you, cause I know when I need you, you be watching my back. Faith is the one thing that I never lack. You gave me a family, man, how gangster is that? And you look after the fallen man, that's all that I ask. Every day's a blessing and every day's a lesson. You gotta have faith, man, you're gonna get tested. Haters stay rested, always do your best, kid. Don't forget he had your back even though no one else did.
I'm trying to cope and do my best. Seen a few loved ones get laid to rest. Didn't know what was going on, I was just a kid. First one I seen, I think I was about 5 or 6. But damn, as I grew older, seen more go and realize gotta cherish your loved ones and thank the Most High. Cause everything can flip upside down in the blink of an eye. Outside I look happy, but I'm dying inside. But damn, I can't lose focus. For my family and kids I do this. You want the truth, I'll give you the purest. Oh Lord, I'll give you all my faith, cause I can't control myself. All the things I've seen and been through feels I'm living in hell.
Every day's a blessing and every day's a lesson. You gotta have faith, man, you're gonna get tested. Haters stay rested, always do your best, kid. Don't forget he had your back even though no one else did. Every day's a blessing and every day's a lesson. You gotta have faith, man, you're gonna get tested. Haters stay rested, always do your best, kid. Don't forget he had your back even though no one else did.
Thank you. You can find his music at KDOG, K-Dog on Spotify. These are your COVID-19 updates. As of January 5th, there are 894 new cases, 8 deaths, 420 hospitalized, and 81 in the ICU. There's a 0% ICU bed availability across Ventura County. It has been said that the ambulances are being encouraged to prioritize trauma victims with a higher chance of living. I was recently driving by Best Buy when I saw a large tent with banners that said, "Get a mask exemption card here."
These badges are not genuine and they are not legal documents according to the U.S. Department of Justice. So please, people have to follow the COVID-19 mandates, wear a mask, and social distance. Up next, Linnea Chandler is going to be talking with you about crime in Simi Valley.
Hi, my name is Linnea Chandler, and I'll be reporting on some local crime in Simi Valley. On January 2nd, 2021, at 11:41 p.m., Simi Valley PD officers were dispatched to the 1100 block of Gibson Avenue. An emergency 911 call had been made by a resident of the home. The reporting party advised that she could hear crying and noise coming from inside the house, but dispatchers were unable to gather any additional information, unfortunately due to a language barrier. Upon arriving to the scene, officers found 2 victims in the front yard with various lacerations and beatings. They apprehended and arrested 2 suspects after attempting to flee the scene. However, there was a 3rd suspect said to still be inside the home. Simi PD, SWAT, and Crisis Negotiation Team, CNT, were contacted and quickly arrived to the scene. Neighboring homes and families inside had to be quickly evacuated at 1:45 a.m. and were not cleared to return until 5 a.m. that morning. In this time, they were able to make telephonic contact with the suspect inside the home, who is said to already have been charged with drug trafficking charges, and were able to apprehend them. As of now, all 3 suspects are in police custody and await trial. For more information and details about this story, you can see the full notification certified by the Simi Valley Police Department at local.nixle.com.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 3 of RadioSimi. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at RadioSimi and on Twitter at RealRadioSimi.
Please share this episode with everyone you know, and remember, if you have any ideas, suggestions, or if you just want to come out on our show, reach out to us at tiny.cc/RadioSimi forum.
And a Happy New Year to everyone who celebrates.